You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 14th of October 2013. 5,000 nursing redundancies since 2010 and 4,500 foreign nurses in 2012 alone. 4 arrested in London terror raids. Pub rescue group delighted at mosque refusal. France's National Front victorious in Brignoles by-election. Germany, refugees go on hunger strike in Berlin. Don't take your daughter to Norway, community service for 12-year-old Muslim gang rapists. African Union says international court cannot try Kenya's president. Rival Al-Qaeda link groups fortifying in Syria with a mix of pragmatism and militancy. Syrian civilians bore brunt of rebels' fury. Thought for the day, Islam, tooth and claw. And finally, ASBOs galore, white fury in action. UK news. 5,000 nursing redundancies since 2010 and 4,500 foreign nurses in 2012 alone. 5,000 British nurses have been made redundant since 2010 and British hospitals have recruited over 4,500 foreign trained nurses in 2012. During 2012 a further 2,500 training places for British nursing students was abolished. 1 in 3 hospitals is bringing in nurses from abroad because wards are so understaffed, an investigation has found. NHS managers are travelling to countries including Poland, Greece, Spain, Portugal, India and the Philippines in the drive to recruit nurses. But concerns have been raised over the English-speaking abilities of some foreign staff, while others may lack training and experience. And MPs and campaigners say it's absurd some hospitals are making nurses redundant or have imposed recruitment freezes while others are desperately having to poach them from abroad. An investigation by Nursing Times using Freedom of Information requests found that 40 out of 105 hospital trusts have actively recruited nurses from abroad within the past 12 months. Dr Peter Carter, Chief Executive and General Secretary of the Royal College of Nursing said, "This is symptomatic of the short-term boom and bust workforce planning which is endemic in the NHS. It is frankly perplexing that on one hand nursing posts are being cut and training places being reduced, while on the other desperate managers are raiding overseas workforces. EU rules prohibit tests on language and skills being carried out on nurses from member states as they are deemed a threat to freedom of labour. Nursing leaders said the health service was wasting a fortune raiding staff from overseas to plug a staffing crisis created by boom and bust planning. A Department of Health spokesman said, "Recruiting from abroad is nothing new. Overseas nurses make a very valuable contribution to NHS patient care." World Today says, bollocks to that one. The NHS have always cut corners in selecting and training of homegrown nursing staff, at the same time spending thousands on advertising and bringing over foreign staff, whom they think in the short term don't cost as much as British nurses. And of course this EU ruling that no foreign nurses can be questioned on the actual ability to speak English or moreover understand patients speaking English doesn't bother the authorities at all. It is all numbers on paper. 4 arrested in London terror raids. 4 men have been arrested in London in a counter-terrorism operation, the Metropolitan Police have said. Scotland Yard said they were held under the Terrorism Act 2000 on suspicion of the commission, preparation or instigation of acts of terrorism. Armed officers were involved in the arrests, which took place at around 1910 in Whitechapel, Bayswater and Peckham areas. Police said searches were taking place at 6 addresses. In a statement, the Met said the arrests were made during a pre-planned intelligence-led operation. The unnamed men had been taken to a South London police station. World Today states, "My research has found out that of the 4 young men detained, 1 was aged 28 of Azerbaijani origin, 2 men of 25 who are British nationals of Turkish and Algerian origins and a 29-year-old British national of Pakistani origin, all described as British nationals and all, I would think, Muslim." Pub rescue group delighted at mosque refusal. A group who helped to rescue pubs from demolition or conversion have spoken out in support of a decision to refuse an application for a new mosque. Around 200 people gathered outside a packed council chamber as Waltham Forest Council's planning committee decided on the application from the Fazan al-Islam organisation to convert the Waltham Oak in Leabridge Road, Walthamstow. The Campaign for Real Ale, CAMRA, which supports communities to save their local pubs from closure and demolition, said it was delighted the bid was rejected. James Watson, Pubs Preservation Officer for the East London and City branch of CAMRA, said, "More and more local authorities are at last beginning to realise what important community facilities our pubs are and are taking measures to save them. In East London we've lost 52% of our pubs over the last 30 years and we're pleased that the tables are slowly beginning to turn." CAMRA registered a formal objection to the proposal along with supporters of the Save the Waltham Oak campaign, as it says the pub, which has been closed for a year, has a long and distinguished history dating back to the 1800s. A pub was first built on the site in 1846 and called Little Wonder, named after the horse which won the 1840 Derby at odds of 50-1. World at 8, good for them and us. It is about time we reinstated our old pubs and started planning refusals to these people who are trying to recreate their own countries in another country. European news. France's National Front victorious in Brignoles by-election. France's National Front won by a wide margin a local by-election in south-east France on Sunday, the latest sign the anti-immigrant party is benefiting from discontent with ruling socialists and mainstream opposition conservatives. Even though the Front National already has an established presence in the region, the victory in the canton of Brignoles near the town port of Toulon suggests it is well placed to make gains in the 2014 municipal and European parliament elections. FN candidate Laurent Lopez won 53.9% of votes against 46.1% for the centre-right UMP candidate Catherine Delzas, according to final results. President François Hollande's socialists did not field their own candidate in the first round, instead backing a communist ally who failed to make it into Sunday's runoff. They subsequently called on left-wing voters to back the UMP, but even that was not enough to avert a Front National victory. This victory, with an unambiguous score and a record turnout, demonstrated that the National Front is a unifying party, Lopez said after the results were announced. The FN has long attracted protest votes, but leader Marine Le Pen is increasingly expanding her appeal to disgruntled socialist and UMP voters with tough talk on crime and illegal Roma immigrants. She has also capitalised on the government's unpopularity and UMP's deep divisions. World Date says, "Never underestimate the powers of the woman politician, especially a clever one, and Marine is very clever." Germany, refugees go on hunger strike in Berlin. Around 20 refugees huddled in a mass of sleeping bags and plastic rain sheets, flanked by crates of bottled water in the very heart of Berlin's tourist area. Most looked exhausted and weary, but sitting by a banner, their frontman put their point across in impassioned and energetic English. Akili Jules Sawa, 29, from Congo, has been on hunger strike for 3 days. "We'll stay until we get our rights, acceptance in society," he said. The protest has grown out of refugee demonstrations in Germany, with the march from Bavaria to Berlin last September attracting attention. But the refugee claim that they are still being treated appallingly at refugee centres in the country and are being denied work and travel rights. Describing life in a refugee camp to the local Glam Valley, 37, said, "You're not allowed to work, move anywhere to eat what you want. You're not allowed education. It is a prison camp. We should be free to travel anywhere we want, live anywhere we want, have education and learn the language. The residence laws should be abolished." World at 8 states, no you shouldn't. Why? Because you cannot contribute anything to Europe that we haven't already got too much of. This is a clear message that was given to the whites in Africa many years ago, and that is, in short, bugger off. At least most whites in Africa fed the Africans and contributed. You do nothing but cause trouble and spread disease. Go home. Don't take your daughter to Norway. A 12-year-old girl from Namsos, Norway, was gang raped twice by 4 Muslim immigrants aged 15 to 18. All 4 perpetrators confessed and argued that the 12-year-old victim consented. The victim was gang raped on an elementary school playground. The thugs were convicted of aggravated rape, but prosecutor Kaja Strandford only asked the court for community service for the perpetrators. World at 8 states. Disgusting, but typical of the soft touch attitude towards Muslims. If I were this child's mother, these rapists would not be safe in their beds. World news. African Union says international court cannot try Kenya's president. The African Union will not allow a sitting head of state to be prosecuted by an international tribunal, the body's chairman said on Saturday, a clear warning that it hopes to stop the trial about to begin in The Hague against Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta for crimes against humanity. African countries accuse the International Criminal Court of disproportionately targeting African leaders. It was not immediately clear how much power the African Union has to stop the proceedings against Kenyatta, who is accused of complicity in ethnic unrest following Kenya's disputed 2007 election in which more than 1,000 people were killed. Kenyatta, 51, has been in office since April. He is from the Kikuyu ethnic group and is accused of having financed and helped organise the Mungiki, a militia-like organisation that was implicated in the worst atrocities against other ethnicities after the 2007 election. World at 8. I am not surprised. The African Union always condones Africans killing anyone. It's a way of life in Africa and has been for thousands of years. They have not progressed at all. Rival Al-Qaeda linked groups fortifying in Syria with a mix of pragmatism and militancy. Shortly before its operatives killed 14 Iraqi Shiite children in a school bombing this month, the group, once known as Al-Qaeda in Iraq, sent guerrillas into northern Syrian villages with orders to reopen local Sunni classrooms. In a series of early fall visits, the militants handed out religious textbooks along with backpacks bearing the group's new name, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. A 4-hour drive to the east, a rival Al-Qaeda faction called Jabhat al-Nusra was busy setting up jobs program in Ash-Shadadi, a desert town which it has held since February. The Islamists restarted production in an oil field that had been idled by fighting, and they fired up the town's natural gas plant, now a source of income for Ash-Shadadi and its new rulers. The two rebel groups, with their distinct lineages to the terrorist network founded by Osama bin Laden, have become the focus of Western fears that jihadist influences within Syria's rebel movement are rising. 2.5 years after the conflict in the country started, Islamists are carving out fiefdoms and showing signs of digging in. World at 8. And we in the West are still helping these animals. Syrian civilians bore brunt of rebels' fury. From the New York Times before dawn on August the 4th, Raed Shekuhu, an olive and walnut farmer in the government-held hilltop village near the Syrian coast, just across the valley from the rebel territory, was woken by gunshots and cries of "God is great, Allahu Akbar." Mr Shekuhi, 42, hid amongst nearby trees with his wife and 4 young children. The next day he emerged to find his uncle shot dead, his family's possessions stolen or destroyed, and the streets littered with bloodstains and the carcasses of farm animals. He recalled last month in an interview in a state-run shelter where he now lives. Many of his neighbours here in Latakia and in the surrounding villages, mostly members of Syria's minority Alawite sect, fared even worse. In a coordinated attack, numerous rebel groups fought off a small garrison of government troops and swept into the villages, killing 190 people, according to a Human Rights Watch report. At least 67 of the dead appeared to have been shot or stabbed while unarmed or fleeing, including 48 women and 11 children, the report said. More than 200 civilians are still being held hostage. Thought for the day: Islam, tooth and claw. There is no other language that the followers of Islam understand more than the laws of the jungle, read in tooth and claw, and many Muslims operate under a blanket of deceit which publicly encompasses peace, love and tolerance, but don't be fooled. The old adage, "it takes one to know one," may well apply to me, as I have already told my listeners that somewhere along in the annals of time, the Mozar name originated in the deserts of Saudi Arabia. So if I have the blood of Arabs running through me, I can criticise and rant about them with impunity, and I will. And this is the text from the critical exposition of the popular jihad which took place in pre-Islamic history, that is just before Muhammad became a so-called prophet and was just a bandit and a warlord with paedophilic tendencies. The Bani Sulaim, a branch of the Bani Kasafa and a sister tribe to the Hawazin, who lived near Mecca and in whose charge Muhammad when an infant was placed, were also a tribe of the Meccan stock descended through Kasafa from Mozar and Moad. And this is the good bit. The Bani Sulaim joined the Bani Ammar and cut to pieces a party of Muslim missionaries at Bar Muna, and they seem to do that quite frequently. So the Mozar tribe didn't like Muhammad either, and I've news for them, I still don't. I must stress I don't hate anyone, but Islam is the nearest I've got to disliking a people for their so-called religion, because it isn't really a religion. Most religions are based on the one God principle, the mother and deity, and of course the evil one. This principle doesn't vary even with pagan religions, and practically every religion on earth has a godlike deity to worship. Not so Islam. Muhammad was a man, and a very flawed one at that, and the Quran is nothing but a premise of how not to live alongside your fellow man, and furthermore not to integrate in any way, whether socially or economically. That is what the Quran is. It is similar to the book of Chairman Mao, a rule book for destroying your enemies and providing a clear path for the writer. The mere fact that most, if not all, the rules in the Quran are way out of date and simply do not apply to the modern world we all live in is totally ignored by the ever-increasing masses of lost people converting to it. My God isn't Allah. He's a totally different God. And I like my God, although I'm not a very good Christian. I'm sure he understands. To truly understand the roots of Islam and its followers, you have to go back to the year 622 AD and stay there. The slaughter of all who opposed Muhammad or tried to appease the warring tribes was commonplace, as indeed it still is now. Only it comes under a different name of democracy through jihad. Also, Muhammad was the first immigrant, as highlighted in a very informative article by Cherson and Moltke from the web. They are American writers and they hit the nail on the head, so to speak, and I quote, "Immigration is known since the times when humans appeared, but Muslims can be proud that their prophet made of immigration a practical guide about how to make all the world Islamic. And as Muhammad was the first official Muslim, so he was also the first official Muslim immigrant. After his own tribe, Quraysh, being sick and tired of Muhammad's bashing their gods and disrespecting their traditions, started to murmur that it's time to put an end to all this, Muhammad ran to Medina, the native town of his mother, and pledged for what we now call asylum. Soon his closest ring of friends and followers followed him, forming what's known in Islamic history as companions. They formed in Medina the first body in history of Muslim immigrants and very soon changed the face of Medina, making it the city of victorious Islam. Muslims learned and remembered this lesson, and since then the concept of Hajj, immigration, as a means of supplanting the native population and reaching the position of power became in Islam a well-developed doctrine. Immigration in Islam is not a Western liberal romance about how the newcomers gratefully search for opportunities for a better life and liberty and offer their talents and loyalty to the benefit of their new homeland. Immigration, as Islam sees it, is an instrument of Islamic expansionism that employs religious and ethnic separatism to gain special status and privilege and then subvert, subdue and subjugate non-Muslim societies and pave the way for their total Islamization and implementation of Sharia law." End of quote. Now I believe this legitimizes all the inroads into Europe and the UK and indeed America that have been made in the last 50 years by followers of Islam. These unspoken rules have been unflinchingly imposed on Western countries by a people who have no regard whatsoever for the indigenous people they invade and conquer and outbreed, because we are not one of them, and therefore, like the Japanese and their ethos of the samurai code, we are less than dogs to Muslims. The hijrah, which is the word for Islamic expansionism, in which the end justifies the means, and those means can and do include a repression of free speech, free religion and an overall repression of women through undereducation and early marriage. To quote another passage from Cherson and Company, "At the initial stage with the hijrah, Muslim immigrants must create the conditions and infrastructure necessary to support the physical presence of Islamic faith. Even the Quranic rules such as the prohibition against the friendship with infidels are suspended for the sake of the goal of future Islamization. The main goal at this stage is the creation of the Ummah or community composed of both Muslims and non-Muslims but run by Muslims." Unquote. Now we see why the reason for all the huge Islamic centres being built throughout Europe and the rest of the Western world. They're like sentry boxes, or could they be similar to concentration camp sentries, watching and waiting until the time is deemed suitable to show their true colours. Tommy Robinson, drummer Lee Rigby and UKIP, although they have suffered different fates, are all linked to Islam and have been taken in by it. Robinson because his future sentencing by our courts might well be more lenient now he has turned his arse to the Islamic kiss. Poor Lee because he was attacked in a fully enriched area of London and no one came to his aid. And UKIP because they are busy kissing Islamic arses within the EU and back home because they see it as a vote winner for the EU elections. The misnamed European Union is of course backing Islam because it's useful for a people to have something to hate that is virtually untouchable and does what it says on the tin, genocide of indigenous peoples. And as we all know, nature abhors a vacuum, and so we would all slide towards either multiple Sharia states known as a caliphate or become such a mudded down, genetically bereft species we would cease to have any nationality or breeding capacity of our own. Whilst Islam is busying itself with taking over Europe by outbreeding us whites, raping our little girls and building huge monstrosities on our lands, they are still operating under a book written hundreds of years ago by their puppet master. They are killing off Christians in Africa and Arabia, they are still carrying out female genital mutilation in many parts of the world, and they are still marrying little girls of 10 in Iran. October the 11th was the UN International Day of the Girl Child, yet another blindsided title to offset the mayhem that occurs once the UN are involved. Last year alone in Iran, 1,537 girls below the age of 10 and 29,827 girls between the ages of 10 and 14 were registered for marriage. In other words, every 15 minutes one innocent life is forced into a marriage that may result in the arrest of her development and her life to be threatened through mental and physical abuse and other forms of violence. Moreover, statistics in Iran from the past 5 years show a significant drop in the number of students enrolled in all-girls schools. Also, the Islamic Republic's recent legalisation of marriages between parents and adopted children encourages this form of paedophilia. Ironically, Iran is currently signatory to multiple international conventions, including the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Supplementary Convention on the Abolition of Slavery, the Slave Trade and Institutions and Practices. Well, that's okay then. But unfortunately what goes on in Vegas doesn't always stay in Vegas, especially as Islam is a parasitical religion and lifestyle. However, all that is ignored just as we ignore the fact that Saudi Arabia and Qatar between them have brought practically everything worth any money in the UK and are currently funding the building of vast Islamic centres throughout Europe to accommodate and create a feeling of home from home for their people. Certainly not for us. If you look carefully at the small print that is given out when any new monstrosity is built, you will note the reference to peace and accommodating of multi-religions within the future edifice. That is how the planners slip through regulations by stating that this mosque will be open to all, when if you or I, without converting, will ever see the inside of these constructions, not on a carefully planned open day, will be a miracle. By the way, how many Christian churches exist in Saudi? What Islam is not achieving through immigration, they are achieving through bribery and corruption of not only our government, but through the EU, all the governments of Europe. All non-Muslims in the UK are encouraged to bow down to Islam and its peoples in a ridiculous attempt to appease these rapacious peoples and delay the inevitable, which by these non-actions alone will increase the impact that Islam could have on Europe in future times. All is not lost, however. You don't have to be a raving nutter to see that there are already grumblings from us Europeans. When did you last hear church bells? When was the last time a Muslim actually paid the penalty for abusing underage children in our country? When have local councils or the police ever taken complaints of harassment from local people by Muslims seriously? Why are local riots and troubles from the white populations driven by the hatred of their Muslim neighbours never reported? Why is it that on a small island like ours, the troubles of the people who have lived and worked all their lives have been put below the wishes of the new invaders, those followers of Islam? Ask yourself those questions and listen very carefully to the answers. And finally, Asbos galore, white fury in action. A swan, whose own nickname is Asboy, has been following in his father's footsteps by terrorising rowers and punters on the River Cam in Cambridge. But after harrowing his fellow swans in a flurry of wings and feathers yesterday, it took on a foe somewhat out of its league. Squaring up to a bullock on the banks of the river, it seemed to be inviting a fight it clearly could not win. While Asboy may enjoy the upper hand in the swan community, the bullock on the towpath was made of sterner stuff, chasing the bird back into the river before it had a chance to overturn the pecking order. Asboy's father, Mr Asbo, was moved to a secret location by the river authorities last year after attacking numerous rowers, biting their arms and legs. Residents fear the same family traits are displayed by Asboy, who has moved upstream and is now targeting tourists in punts. Onlookers watching the son's assault on another swan screamed as they saw the bird grabbing it by the neck with its beak. Asboy then appeared to try to drown the other swan, holding its neck under the water for about 15 seconds and sitting when it wriggled free. The beleaguered swan only escaped when its partner came to the rescue. Thomas Ellis, 52, who lives near the river in Cambridge and witnessed the attack, said, "I've never seen such a vicious swan. He appears to be even worse than his dad. I've seen him swimming up and down the river close to the punts, and he has even attacked a few punting poles. People fear he will be a repeat of his dad, and some are now too frightened to go out into the water when he's around." This presenter says good. With some of our newcomers killing and eating our swans, we need Asboy, bless him. He clearly doesn't like humans, and frankly I can see why. Swans are aggressive birds and always have been. As a child I was always warned not to go near them. People nowadays don't respect the swan's space. We need more Asboys. He looks a fine figure of a bird to me, and the bullock handled it okay, just driving it back into its habitat. You've been listening to The World at 8. I'm Lynn Mozart, and I wish you all a very good night.